Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. And so that's pretty hopeful, because that means that when the meat sack gives up the ghost, hey, that's an interesting turn of phrase, isn't it? We're the ghost. When the meat sack doesn't operate anymore, the ghost goes on, the spirit goes on, the energy continues. And we know that that then there is life and consciousness after this material death. And why don't we know this a little better? Well, because we are like the tip of the phonograph needle. The universe is the big 33 LP, and we're the needle. All we know is that little point that we can perceive. What they also saw is that there has been prior contact. They saw contact between President Eisenhower and UFOs and their occupants. Some of you, I'm sure, have heard people talk about this. They gave a very good description of all that. Apparently they came and tried to make a deal with the world leaders. Okay, you're the world leaders, and we'll welcome you into the Galactic Federation, but of course you have to have someone who speaks for Earth. And stop and think about it. Who speaks for Earth? Nobody speaks for Earth. Putin doesn't speak for Earth. Bush doesn't speak for Earth. In fact, if the polls are correct, he doesn't even really speak for the United States. But so we are going to have somebody who speaks for Earth. And I'll take this opportunity to share this with you. You probably already heard me rant and rave at some time or another about the New World Order and about the North American Union and yada, yada, yada. I want you to understand, philosophically, I am not opposed to globalism. We are one humanity. We are one human race. We all occupy this small blue world that's out on the outer fringes of one of the outer galaxies. I mean, let's face it, we're in the boondocks out here, basically. And but we are all in the same boat. We're all in the same world. So I'm not opposed to the idea that at some point somebody's going to ask you where you're from, and you're going to say, well, I'm from Earth. And because that's where eventually we will get to. No, my problem is that we're being tricked, manipulated, pushed into this new world order, into this North American Union, into this globalization by people whose track record shows that they, at heart, do not have the best interest of the people in their heart. What they want is total control. It's what Nicholas Rockefeller told the movie producer Aaron Russo when he asked him, well, what's the basic game plan? And Nick Rockefeller said, to microchip the population and control the world. And that's the game plan. And that's what they're working towards, and they're making quite good progress. So I'm not opposed to globalization. I'm simply opposed to it being pushed off on us with no vote, with no one being fully aware of what the agenda is or what the ramifications are, and with this whole agenda being thrust upon us through secrecy and deceit. It just makes a mockery of the whole concept of democracy and freedom and individual liberty. Maybe I'm an idiot, but I happen to believe in the innate goodness of most people, because this is what I've found in my experience all around the world. You give people half a chance and they're good people. Right. And I say that because I know I'm in good hands and good fellowship here. Everybody here has an open mind. Everybody here, there's many varied opinions out there on many varied subjects, and yet I think that everybody in this hall, we could all agree to disagree. And we can disagree without being disagreeable. All right? But it's amazing to me the number of people in the world who are so adamant in their structured belief systems that they cannot even tolerate the idea that somebody else might have a different opinion or a different thought than them, and as a result, they're willing to kill people if you don't believe the way that they want you to believe. And of course, that's not right. So now we ask ourselves, all of this stuff, this viewing they're seeing, when they see these different people coming and they see all these craft and they see all these aliens, how do we know that any of this is real? Well, again, you have to look for feedback. And I think one of the clearest examples of space viewing and feedback is the Mars Observer, which was lost in August of 1995, just as it was about to enter the orbit of Mars. At that time, I was still in close contact with several of the remote viewers, and when the news came that the Mars Observer had been lost, I immediately picked up the telephone and I said, "What happened to the Mars Observer?" And I was told, well, the same thing that happened to the Phobos 2. Well, so what happened to the Phobos 2? Phobos 2 was lost in August of 1995. That was the Soviet Union's attempt to send a Mars observer. It too was going to go into orbit around Mars. And what you see here is a drawing done by one of the remote viewers, military remote viewers. You see an antenna or some kind of a leg from the Phobos 2. They're coming into orbit around Mars, and you can see this little bitty object right here. What they said happened was that, or what they saw, was that as the Phobos 2 approached orbit with Mars, this circular object rose off the surface and came out to meet it. Now, they said they did not get any impression that this was a hostile act. In fact, the analogy they gave was it's kind of like the tugboat coming out to meet the Queen Mary. It came out to guide it in or whatever. But when it got out there, it scanned the Phobos 2 with some sort of electromagnetic beam and then realized that, hey, this isn't ours, and we don't have anything to do with this. So the object turned and went back and landed on the surface of Mars. But when this beam scanned the Phobos 2, it disrupted the onboard computer, and the controllers lost control over the craft, and it spun out of control, went into the atmosphere of Mars and burned up and crashing to the surface. Well, okay, there's a good story, but how do we know that that's what happened? Here we can see a close-up, and you see Mars as the circle with the lines, and then this little ob-shaped object is what they saw. It was somewhat circular, but it's oblong. It's not a complete circle. Well, a few years later, the cosmonaut Colonel Marina Popovich visits the United States, and in San Francisco, she holds up one of the last photographs taken by the Phobos 2 and beamed back to Earth before they lost control and it spun into the surface of Mars. And I don't have to point out that it looks amazingly similar to the little object that was seen by the remote viewers. This is feedback. This means that something that sounded like an outrageous story has some foundations in truth. Now, you can read about the 1996 UFO study that I commissioned in my book, Alien Agenda. You can read some of the more up-to-date information about remote viewing and also where a lot of the remote viewers are today, what they're doing, in a new updated version from New Page Books. That it also includes a very comprehensive index, which I always like. To me, a book without an index is just, forget it, because you can't go back, you can't find anything. And so both of these books would detail even more and more of what I saw about, not what I saw, but what I report on the remote viewers and what they have seen in their views of extraterrestrials and UFOs. You can also visit my website, jimmars.com, and if you want to keep up with, I post all the wild stories that you probably won't find in your mainstream establishment news. But I guess I'll wrap up at this point by saying that even though the military and through their mouthpieces in the mainstream media would like you to think that the sightings down at Stephenville all took place on January the 8th, the reality is that they began on January the 1st, and as far as I know, are continuing right up to this very day. But of course, you don't get to hear about that, because if they can keep it confined to that one day, to that one sighting, then their cockamamie excuses like, well, it was two airplanes that happened to cross paths at the same time, or it's the 10 F-16s flying around, or it's a sundog. That was one of a perihelion, I think is what they call it. We know as a sundog. That's a reflection off ice crystals in the upper atmosphere when the sun's out. That one fell by the wayside pretty quick when it was pointed out that about half of these sightings down there took place at night when the sun wasn't even up. So yes, all that's continuing. I'll leave you with the old Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. And we are living in interesting times, and I thank you for your ear and your attention. I don't know if... Thank you. We do have a little bit of time left, so I will entertain questions, and plus I want to put in a plug for a new book that I got coming out from HarperCollins. I think that it's going to come out under the William Morrow imprint, but still, it's a big-time publisher. I won't go into what that book's about, but I will tell you the title, The Rise of the Fourth Reich. Okay? So I think you can figure out where I'm going on that one. Hey.
I just wanted to bug you publicly and ask you, when are you going to write a book on mind control?
On mind control? They won't let me. No, I'll tell you something. Mind control, this is a really scary subject. And you have to be very careful getting into that, because you can go flying off into paranoia. You can just go nuts with mind control. And it's not just recent stuff. It's not just the Harper Ray and the stuff that's happening now. When we brought the Nazis in over this country under paperclip, we all know we brought in their rocket scientists, but what we don't know is we brought in their mind control experts and the people who were trying to figure out how to modify human behavior through drugs, hypnotherapy, just all kinds of things. It is a subject that needs to be approached. I know of only really two really good books, and that is John Mark's In Search of the Manchurian Candidate and Walter Bort, CIA Mind Control or something like that.
But that's why we're waiting for your book. We know you can do it right.
All right, I'll keep that in mind. If I can ever get my own mind under control, actually, it would be a good topic, but that gets pretty bad. And I will say this, though. Let me say this. I'm going to share with you one of the biggest, darkest, baddest, ugliest stories taking place today, and you're not hearing about it. We all hear about these terrible school shootings where people go into school to shoot up the place. What's that about? Well, they say, well, it's the guns. We got to take up the guns. Forget it, folks. I grew up in Texas. We used to go drive to school and had a gun rack in the back of the pickup truck. You know, everybody had a gun. I even got in trouble in junior high school because I took a hand grenade to school. You know, it was not live. It was not live. But that was pretty funny, and that shows you the difference in the times. I was sitting in the back of the history class, and one of my buddies across the way said, "What you got there?" And I said, "Oh, I brought this dummy hand grenade in this school." And he said, "Well, let me see it." And the teacher had his back to the back blackboard, you know. So I pitched it to him, and just as I pitched it, the teacher turns around. Here's a hand grenade flying around the back of the class. Well, needless to say, he comes back there and he grabs it and he looks at it, and it's got a hole in the bottom. He knows it's deactivated. It's not real. And so, of course, we got in trouble. He went up and set it on his desk, you know. And after class was over, I went up there and I had to get 2 licks. Okay? Had to bend over and pow, pow. Okay? And then he gave it back to me. He said, and don't bring that to school again. And I said, yes, sir. And I didn't. That was back in the days of the old republic, when we were free. Okay? I also often got in trouble because I was an avid reader, and the class would try to be reading something out of one of the textbooks. I'd be 2 chapters ahead. So needless to say, I was bored. So I'd end up looking out the window, daydreaming a little bit. And the next thing I know, they're coming around, they rap me on the hand and say, Jimmy, pay attention, stay with the rest of the class. Yes, ma'am. That was all that was. Today, they would send me to the nurse who's been conditioned, trained, educated to say, well, I think your son has attention deficit disorder. You need to go take him to the doctor, and you need to get him on medication. And they put me on Ritalin or on Prozac. Prozac, by the way, the proper name is fluoroxide, because it's 94% sodium fluoride, okay, which was used to put in the water of the concentration camps of the Nazis and in the Gulag in Soviet Russia to keep the inmates pacified and non-resistant. And if you think that sounds pretty bad, just stop and think that's what they're putting in your water, okay? And yet, look at the toothpaste that has fluoride in it. Now they got hazardous warnings. If your child swallows this, call the Center for Disease Control. Oh, yeah, that's what I want to do, is put poison in my mouth. We're idiots, folks. And then we wonder about these school shootings because you don't hear much about this. You have to read the last paragraph of the story or way down in there, and you find out every single one of these idiots that are shooting up the schools are either on psychotropic drugs or are just coming off of psychotropic drugs, which apparently is even worse than going on them. And what it does is it wipes away your inhibitions. It wipes away your critical thinking and your morality and your moral compass, and it intensifies whatever you're feeling. So if you're a young adolescent and your hormones are raging anyway, and you're thinking, oh man, nobody likes me and I'm being picked on, and one of these days I'm going to be Spider-Man, I'm going to be the guy I'll take on, and then this is intensified by a factor of 10 and your inhibitions are taken away, and then they wonder why there are these school shootings. But you haven't heard any of that, have you? They don't point to these drugs, do they? And you know why? Because last year alone, the pharmaceutical industry spent over $3.5 billion on direct-to-consumer advertising, and there's not one newspaper, there's not one TV station, not one network, not one cable in this whole country that wants to risk losing one of their largest advertisers. So they keep it bottled up. And meanwhile, innocent kids keep dying. It's the biggest story going unreported today, and it all has to do with money and power and control. It's terrible. Yes.
I want to thank you on behalf of me and my wife. We are apprenticed into this new field. We started your book, The Alien Agenda, almost 3 weeks ago. And the point is this one. I just spent the last year to learn about what you call the New World Order. I was completely into the Matrix just 1 year ago. And my point is that this one, it looks to me like a normal, almost continuing of this journey. The question that you were talking before, and this is also my personal opinion, probably most of you already know about it. If I was an alien species, if I wanted to somehow to control us, what better way would be than just use part of our government voluntarily or involuntarily, could be, I don't know, mind control or maybe just through, I don't know, whatever. My point is, I don't think this, what the government, according to what the government is preparing for us, looking at the facts and the New World Order and the liberties that we're losing, and unfortunately all the violence that we see are coming to us, like happened already in Germany during the Hitler and many other times. I don't think these aliens, they're really our friends, if that's unfortunately, and that's my personal belief. When I see like a New World Order acting like we knew they were acting, this is not a conspiracy, they are facts. And just 3 weeks ago, I started to understand that maybe There are more than just humans planning this for us. Maybe somebody else from another planet that want to use our resources and try to control us. And what better way to use our own laws to submit us?
Right.
That's my question, and please give me your feedback. Thank you.
Well, let's put it this way. You all think of yourselves as Charlton Heston. You're on the planet of the apes. And there's 6.5 billion apes. Now, you're smart, and you know that there are other worlds out there, and that you come from this other world, and you know there's other technology out there, but you're stuck here. How are you going to control 6.5 billion apes? You can't. Anybody remember the opening scene of the X-Files movie where they had the two cavemen and they go in the cave and encounter this reptilian alien type, and he kills one of the cavemen, but the other caveman kills him. It's 2-1. He got in a lucky shot. So that was just 2-1. You can imagine what it'd be like 6.5 billion to 1. So how do you control the planet of the apes? Only one way, through secrecy and deceit. And you keep the apes fighting with each other, and you keep them disunited, and you keep them conflicted, and you keep them arguing with each other. And in that way, they haven't got time to stop and consider that you're the one that's actually pulling the strings. And that's how you control. And what do we do about it? Well, there's 6.5 billion of us. There's a whole lot more of us than there are of them. So all we got to do is get the education going with the small e, not formal school education, but just knowledge. If we could get people to understand what's really going on, then again, back to what I said earlier, that I think most people are good-hearted, they're well-intentioned, they want what's best for everybody, and I think that we could regain true freedom and liberty for this country. But look where we are. Let's go back to 2004, okay? You could vote for George W. Bush, the Republican, who was an oil man and a Skull and Bones secret society member. Or your choice was you could vote for his cousin, John Kerry, Democrat, oil man and Skull and Bones member. Is there really any choice there? No. Now, this time, look, politics, political year. Everybody's going back and forth. And it's Obama this and Hillary that and John McCain, blah, blah, blah. Behind John McCain is Henry Kissinger. Behind Obama is Zbigniew Brzezinski. Behind Hillary is the Bilderberger. She's the first American First Lady to attend Bilderberg meetings, and she didn't just attend the meeting, just sit there and see what was going on. She was at the front door greeting people when they came in, which is their time-honored method of introducing their protégés to the membership. Or if you want to reach down, you might even go find Mike Huckabee. One of his main advisors is Richard Haas, president of the Council on Foreign Relations. So what am I telling you? I'm telling you that you really only got two choices in this election. You can vote for one of the above, and you're going to get the New World Order and the North American Union, or you can vote for Ron Paul. Well, that's your only choice. That is your only choice. But people don't understand that, and Ron Paul, of course, is a media non-person. It's just like he's not there. If everyone could hear, number one, his platform, which is to go back to constitutional government, basically, and read his qualifications, he's one of the only members in Congress who has refused to take their golden parachute personal private retirement package. He has turned down all the government junkets. He has voted against the Iraqi war. He wants to audit, if not do away with the IRS and the Federal Reserve System. He wants to return to constitutional government. Here is an alternative, folks. Here's a true alternative. And I'm not trying to say he hung the moon. He may have problems too, but at least he offers a true alternative. But you don't ever hear about that because they control the mass media. And that makes a mockery out of the whole idea of freedom and democracy. But the gentleman had a good point. there's no question that there's a little handful, a little clique, a little cabal of people who are trying to run this world. What are they after? Are they after money? No. They got all the money that they could stand, okay? So it's something else, power and control. Why do they want power and control? Because if you go back to history, you find out that there's been this little clique in these royal bloodlines. And by the way, are you ready for this? According to Lynn Cheney, Dick Cheney's wife, she found this out in researching her book. Barack Obama is a cousin to Dick Cheney. Sounds amazing, but it's true. I just pointed out how Kerry and Bush are both related, and Kerry and Bush are both related to the Gore family. And they're all related to the Windsors. And the Windsors are the royal bloodline, and you go all the way back to the Nazis, to the royalty of Europe, to the Pharaohs, the Caesars, all the way back. They've been concerned with the bloodline. And what's that got to do with it? Could it be that this bloodline tracks back to the ancient Anunnaki, those who came from the heavens and colonized the earth? And could they be this small handful of people who are trying to control this world so that they can get control over their globalization, so then they can present the united front of Earth to the Galactic Federation and then be in control of this entire planet? I don't know, but I'll tell you, we need to start figuring out what's really going on if we're going to ever continue to call ourselves free Americans or even free Earthlings. I thank you for your time.